Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel. I'm your host, Peter Ndoro. Good morning and thank you very much for joining us. Now, this is what you can look forward to on the show today. We'll be chatting to an ICASA councillor about the regulation and policy for digital radio in South Africa. This against the backdrop of a Radio Africa conference which was concluded on Friday. We'll also be taking a look at a scathing report released by Right to Know on surveillance conducted by the state on South African journalists. We'll also be taking a look, of course, as we usually do, at the Sunday newspapers and what they're carrying this morning. But before we get into that whole discussion, let's take a look at those Sunday papers and see what they're saying. Now, the Sunday Times is leading with a story where the paper says that Jacob Zuma's worst nightmare will come true early this week when his son Duduzane is charged over allegations that he was part of a plot by the controversial Gupta family to bribe former Deputy Minister SABC Jonas in return for him to become a finance minister. The City Press also leads with a story about the former president's son ahead of court appearance in Johannesburg's specialized crime court tomorrow, where he's set to be charged with corruption. A similar front page for the Sunday Independent, the paper leading too with details of how they describe as a net closing in on former Duduzane Zuma, former president's son Duduzane Zuma, reporting how the Hawks are set to arrest him tomorrow in connection with the investigation into state capture. KwaZulu-Natal's Sunday Tribune also carrying a similar story. It's all Duduzane Zuma, I'm afraid, and how he evaded arrest on Thursday evening at OR Tambo International Airport and will soon face the might of the law over his alleged involvement in state capture. And guess what? The Argus in the Western Cape, Duduzane Zuma, is also the front page there with the Cape Town's Weekend Argus as the other papers pretty much focused on how the Hawks are likely to arrest him tomorrow in connection with their state capture investigations. Alright, we go to Swaziland now. Duduzane Zuma is not on the front page there. The Sunday Observer there is leading with a story about the outgoing Prime Minister, Sibusiso Dlamini, who's expecting to get a new house and a car when he leaves office without any qualms, as he was not the one who created the retirement package, but it came as a result of nationwide outcry when members of the public as well as the press complained that the Finance Circular number 1 of 2010 and how it left politicians beggars after their term of office comes to an end. But you get a salary, don't you? Anyway, Nigeria's Daily Trust runs with a story about Nigeria's two major parties, the All Progressive Congress Party, the APC, and the People's Democratic Party, the PDP, with just a week to the governorship elections in Ekiti State. The APC and the opposition PDP are locked in an epic battle for the soul of the state. Alright, so those are the front pages of your newspapers, and ones that I'm going to be taking a closer look at with my editors in a short while. But one story that's really captured our hearts and minds, and one that you should be paying attention to as well, is digital radio. The Wits Radio Academy held an annual Radio Days Africa conference in association with Radio Days Europe, and that's brought together industry experts from South Africa and around the world to share their experiences of using DAB+, showing how commercial broadcasters can grow audiences and revenues by moving to digital. Now, the conference has become the premier gathering of radio leaders and influencers on the African continent. South Africa's media regulator, ICASA, is currently soliciting industry responses to its consultation paper on implementing digital radio. They delivered an address on the regulation and policy for digital radio in South Africa. And to tell us a little bit more about that, I'm now joined by ICASA councillor, Dimakatso Pocha. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the program. Always a pleasure to have you. I feel bad to get you up every Sunday morning, but thank you for coming. All right, so most of us have been talking about digital satellite television, DTTV, terrestrial television, But radio is on the spectrum as well now. This is something that you've started a process on. Help us and the public understand, what does digital radio broadcast mean?
Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks very much for having us. As ICASA, we're really appreciative of this opportunity. And good morning to the listeners out there as well. Yes, indeed, digital radio has been in the card for all these years, except for the fact that it was overshadowed by DTT. As we know, DTT was a national imperative for the country to migrate from digital to analog television broadcasting. So with radio, we're expecting the very benefits that we're getting from DTT. But for digital radio to fully be realized, we need to have migrated fully from DTT, from analog broadcasting services. So DSB, as we call it, is a more modified way of receiving radio services, and it's a digital service as well. So we're expecting that incumbent radio stations will then have an opportunity to showcase or even have additional services onto the platform, which will be more enticing to the listeners out there.
All right, so I'm a consumer of radio at home. How will my life change as a result of digitizing radio?
Your life as a listener out there will change in the sense that you'll have a variety of services. There's no doubt FM is still of perfect quality, but the reason why we are migrating to digital radio is mainly because we've ran out of spectrum, as it is the case with television. So the benefits of digital radio will therefore then be that a listener will have a variety of services.
So there'll be more radio stations.
There will be more radio stations, but it will also range from data as well as sound. So there'll be additional services that will be added onto the platform. And it is also a very much more effective way of utilizing the very scarce resource, which is the radio spectrum.
All right, so a couple of months ago you put out a notice and asked for industry and interested parties to submit their thoughts on this process that you've undertaken. That was phase one. Tell us a little bit about that phase and what some of the submissions that came through to you were saying.
So just to educate you a bit, in order for us to be able to even consider licensing digital radio, we need to have a policy framework in place. And we are very encouraged to know that the Department of Communications has already made pronouncements to the fact that they'll be publishing a policy directive which will direct ICASA as to which route to take. And emanating from policy, then we formulate regulations, because regulations always follow policy. So we'll formulate the regulations, and the very process that you're speaking to is the one that we've started in terms of trying to solicit views from interested parties, from manufacturers, from broadcasters, and even from your grassroots people to tell us what is it that they're envisaging in the form of digital radio. So what will happen is, what has happened, we've published a discussion document. The discussion document closed sometime in June. And after the discussion document, we are then going to be having oral hearings. And it's very coincidental that we're having the oral hearings on the 11th, this coming week. Between the 11th and the 13th, that's when we'll be having oral hearings. And the oral hearings will then assist us to come to a conclusion whether we just come up with a findings document, or which can also be accompanied by regulations, which will then lay a regulatory framework for.
So is digital radio going to happen? Is it just finding a way to get there? Have we decided we're going to do it for sure?
It is going to happen. It is only about laying the foundation. Yes, it is going to happen. But one other consideration that policy may want to consider, and which is what you've seen in other countries, where countries have actually completely switched off FM, mainly because they realize that there is a business case to make for digital radio. But in South Africa, we do not have such a policy. So we will find an instance where FM will actually run parallel with digital radio.
All right, so I've got a radio in my car right now. I'm driving home and I'm listening to SAFM. Once we go digital, do I have to change my car radio, or does life carry on as it was?
With radio, we will need to have appropriate receivers out there. There are various technologies, and there will be a need to have the appropriate receivers installed.
Wow.
And we already find that in very high-end car manufacturers nowadays are already embedding DSB receivers in their vehicles. So there will be there will also be a need to change your end user equipment.
What about my grandmother in the rural areas that's got a small transistor radio? Will that have to change?
And the good thing about digital radio, I think, is the fact that the economies of scales are already beginning to shift. So you might find that the affordability, of course, is an issue as to whether your grassroots people will be able to receive. And I think that's one decision that the policymaker will actually have to come with, to say, how do we then ensure that your granny out there is able to receive the service? But as I said, FM will still coexist, so people will still have a choice of utilizing their old FM station radios, and will still be able to receive their FM services, while your new and upcomers will then be able to migrate to a new receiving device.
Are you encouraging the public to come to these hearings? What can they do at these hearings?
So at the hearings, we're starting on the 11th at 9 o'clock at ICASA, our offices in Sandton. People that will be given an opportunity to participate in oral hearings are those that have already made written submissions. But people who come, interested parties, community members, are encouraged to come, and they can be able to ask questions to the presenters from the gallery in the event that they do come to the hearings. All
right, so the ones that have made submissions, very briefly, what have they said so far? What's the conversation been like so far?
Without really, making a determination of what the outcome will be like, but the kind of questions that the discussion document was about, what kind of technology should the country be deploying? Because as you know, we've been doing trials in South Africa where we have done, ICASA has licensed the trials for for DAB+. We've also licensed what we call DRM, DRM 30, which tests on the medium wave, while DAB+ is on the FM. So it's about asking interested parties out there, what technology would you like to see happening? And other questions are very technical questions as to whether should it be a single frequency network, or should be a multi MFN. So those are technical questions, but the technical guys out there will be able to assist in arriving to an appropriate regulatory framework.
Dimakatso, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming through. I think this is a conversation we need to have again, talking about television and radio as well, because we are in the fourth industrial revolution, and our lives are changing, and we need to be attuned with this technology. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that was Dimakatso Kocha, who's an ICASA counsellor, talking to us about digital radio, and hearings are taking place from this week already. Make yourself available, find out a little bit more, because this is going to affect your lives one way or another, and I think it's going to be good times for us once we go digital. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, surveillance of journalists, really?